Chapter 16. Carefully trying hard not to disturb the snake inside, I checked the knot on the bag. It was still firm and tight. I wanted to roll the sack over or pick it up to make sure there weren't any holes that had been created by the snake pushing against the fiber. But picking it up might wake up the snake. It had been completely still for the past while, and if it was wise to let sleeping dogs lie, it was probably twice as smart not to wake up a sleeping boa constrictor. I'd been so pleased when the snake finally settled down. It had been unnerving to see the bag moving, especially after Augie had left and I was by myself. He had to get to the synagogue. We'd agreed he'd be back early tomorrow for us to work on our assignment on friendship. My father came in shortly after Augie left. He hollered down a hello. It was good just to have somebody else in the house. I guess I could have called him down, asked for his advice and help in finishing up the pen, but I knew he'd be busy doing something. He was always busy doing something. And I didn't want to bother him. And I was okay as long as the snake was sleeping. It was sleeping, wasn't it? I had a horrible thought. What if it wasn't sleeping? What if it was dead? What if it ran out of air and smothered in the bag? No, it couldn't have. It was a burlap sack, and there were lots and lots of little holes in burlap, weren't there? I put down the hammer. There was still a bunch of small nails I wanted to drive into the joints to secure the walls and screen, but that would have to wait. Slowly, hardly making a sound, I slipped over to the bag. I grabbed it with both hands and lifted it up, feeling the strain in my arms. There was no motion from inside. It felt like dead weight. My stomach did a flip. "Wake up!" I yelled as I gave the sack a real shake. Nothing. It either was soundly sleeping or dead. If it was sleeping, I was okay. If it was dead, then I was dead. I couldn't help but think how everybody at school would react, how Frankie would react. If all I had to show for their money was a dead snake, a snake that I'd killed, that would make me as bad as the people who tortured Bogart. Maybe I didn't do it on purpose, but wait, what if it was only a little dead? I'd taken first aid in health, and I'd seen hundreds and hundreds of hospital shows on TV. Maybe I could revive it with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. That thought made me shudder. Either way, I had to get it out of the bag and into the pen. I started to run upstairs. I needed to get both the snake and the pen into my room. The heavy sack swung like a pendulum as I awkwardly lumbered up the stairs. I staggered into the kitchen. My father was at the kitchen sink washing the dishes. "What you got in the bag?" he asked. "The snake from Mr. Johnston." "Must be a big snake." "Pretty big," I said. "You going to show it to me?" he asked. Soon as I put it in the pen, I called back over my shoulder. "Is that what you were building down in the basement?" he called. "Yep," I yelled back as I started up the stairs to my room. I was nowhere near the top of the steps when I heard music flowing down the stairs. My sister was obviously home too. If she saw the bag, she'd ask me what was inside, and if I told her, she'd freak. I reached the top of the stairs and peeked around the corner and down the hall. Her door was closed. Good. I pushed open the door to my room, stumbled, and banged the bag heavily into the doorframe. Suddenly the snake came to life and the sack shivered and shook. In shock, I almost dropped it. Then my shock gave way to relief. The snake wasn't just alive. It was very alive. Thank God. I put the bag down on the floor. The snake continued to move around. I didn't want to leave it there alone, but I had to go get the pen. I pulled my bedroom door closed. I bounded down the stairs, a few at a time, and then leaped down the final half a dozen, landing with a thunderous thud at the bottom. I scrambled around the corner and through the kitchen. "Sounded like a truck hit the side of the house," my father said as I ran by. "No truck, just me, sorry," I said as I took to the basement stairs. I had to slow down because these steps were steep and uneven and strangely spaced. I held onto the railing and reached the bottom. I brushed the hammer and nails off the top of the pen. No time for any more nails now. The pen was strong enough. I lifted up the pen and started back up the stairs, struggling to heft it up the steps. "That's not your finest work," my father said, eyeing the pen. "It's just for a few days, and then the snake is gone." "You say that about all the things you bring home," he commented. "But this time I mean it. I mean it all the time. It's just this time it's for sure." My father smiled. "No, seriously. Like I said, this is for Mr. Johnston, and it'll only be here until Monday. You must really like this teacher. He's a good teacher, and we got a real special deal, so we got him a really big snake." "So you bought a snake on sale?" he asked, laughing out the last few words. It was good to see him laugh, good and rare. "It's almost 6 feet long. Wow, that is amazing. You have a 6-foot snake in your room?" "A little over 6 feet. Do you want to see it?" "Definitely," he said, drying his hands on the front of his shirt. "Let me help you with that." My father took the pen from my hands. He handled it like it was light. I guess for him it was. He followed me up the stairs and into my room. The snake is right in the... The bag wasn't in the middle of the floor where I'd left it. It couldn't be gone. It had to be right. I caught sight of a corner of the bag. It was almost completely under the bed, and it moved as the snake moved within it. I dropped to my knees, grabbed the bag, and pulled it out. Where do you want me to put this? My father asked. Just over here, beside my bed. It was practically the only area of the floor not already covered with furniture or animal pens. It's just for 2 days. The pen was slightly over 3 feet long, half as wide, and about 2 feet tall. The top was attached by hinges that allowed the whole thing to open up. A small patch, 3 inches square, had been cut out of the top and replaced by wire mesh to let in air. I'd put a latch to hold the top in place so the snake couldn't force it open. After all, a boa was nothing more than one large, long, strong muscle. I opened up the top and placed the bag inside the pen. I fumbled at the knot, and when it came free, I rolled the bag back slightly. The snake started to inch its way out. I drew back my hand. That is some snake, my father said, obviously impressed, as the snake kept flowing from the bag. As it stretched out, its head reached the farthest corner of the pen, while most of it remained inside the sack. It started up the side of the pen and looked like it was trying to get away. Instinctively, I reached out to grab it and pulled it back. Like a bolt of lightning, the snake swung its head around and lunged at me. I dropped the snake and slammed down the lid. Almost in the same motion, I snapped the latch closed, locking the lid in place. That snake can really move, my father noted. Snake? What snake? I turned around. My sister Janice was standing at my bedroom door. You have a snake? She screeched. You know I hate snakes. I shouldn't have to live in the same house with a snake. Isn't it bad enough that I have to live with all those other awful animals? Janice, I hate snakes. I refuse to stay in the same house with a snake, she screamed. Janice, they're so slimy and awful and they make my skin crawl. Janice, it's going, and I don't care if it's in your room, just knowing it's in the same house as me is more than I can stand. It has to go. Janice, it's going to go, I finally managed to blurt out when she stopped to take a breath. It is? She asked, sounding surprised. I think my answer caught her off guard. She was expecting a fight. It'll be gone by Monday morning. Monday? I'll be bringing it to school. For a while or forever? She asked suspiciously. Forever. We're giving it to my science teacher, Mr. Johnston. What do you mean, we? She asked. Me and Augie, but I guess really everybody in the whole school is a part of it. Almost every kid contributed money to buy the snake. She looked at me and then at the pen by my feet. How big is it? Her face was calm and quiet. Much calm and quieter than I knew she must be feeling inside. It's not that big. For a boa constrictor, I answered. Oh my God, she muttered as she backed away a couple of steps. It's not big enough to hurt you, I said reassuringly. How big is it? She asked again. About 6 feet long, she gasped. And it's like I said, it isn't big enough to hurt you, but it could hurt something smaller, couldn't it? Sure, of course. Like my cat, or even Candy, she said. I don't know about Candy. She can probably take care of herself. But it could hurt my Gandalf. She turned directly to Dad. This isn't fair. You have to make him get that killer out of our house immediately. Isn't it bad enough that my poor Gandalf has to put up with those ugly alley cats of his when he goes outside? Now my cat isn't even safe in the house? Your cat is safe as long as he stays out of my room. Which reminds me, I want him to stay out of my room forever. I want him to stop using Ollie's pen as a litter box. My sister chuckled. She always found it amusing that her cat did that in my room. I'm glad you think it's funny now, but just wait. Ollie's getting bigger all the time. It's just a matter of time before Gandalf becomes Alligator Chow. Maybe you better save some of your money to buy a little kitty walker, because I'm positive Ollie could take off a foot. That wiped the smirk off her face. Well, that's it then. Both the snake and the alligator have to leave immediately. Ollie's not going anywhere. Just where do you think I can bring the snake to? I demanded. I don't know, and I don't care. I just know that I refuse to sleep in the same house as that evil serpent. Good, then. Maybe you can go and stay someplace else. Maybe I will, and... Both of you stop it, my father said. But Dad, it's just... Now, he snapped. The alligator stays, and the snake is going to leave the house. But Dad, I can't just... On Monday, he continued. And it would be wise if the door to your room stayed closed. Not just now, but always. So the cat stays away from the alligator. But I don't like to sleep with the door closed. You're just going to have to learn to like it, he said. Any arguments? When my father said any arguments, it meant don't even try to argue. Okay, sure, I answered. Good. Now I want you to take the snake out of the pen and show it to your sister, he said. I don't want to see it, she screamed, backing right out of my room until she was standing in the hall. Finally, she and I could agree on something about the snake. I didn't want to show it to her any more than she wanted to see it. It's better to confront your fears than to run from them, my father said calmly. He turned to me. Show her there's nothing to be afraid of. Pick it up. I'd originally thought he just wanted me to open the pen. This was worse. I didn't want to admit it, but I was feeling nervous. No, worse than nervous. I was scared, but there was no way I could show it. If they saw how I felt, I might have to take the snake someplace else right now. Besides, my father was here. Nothing could happen with him around. My father and sister were both staring at me, waiting. Maybe it wasn't just my sister who needed to confront her fears, and it wasn't like I didn't know what I was doing. I'd picked up Bogart dozens and dozens of times. But this wasn't Bogart. Quickly, before I had time to rethink it, I reached down and clicked the latch, unlocking the lid. I raised my hands and readied myself. Could you open up the top so I can grab the snake? I asked my father. He opened the lid, and almost instantly the boa's head started to climb the side. I reached out with my left hand and grabbed it just behind the head. It was so thick I couldn't close my hand around it. It reacted to my touch and threw its coils, trying to wrap itself around my arm. I knew exactly what I had to do next. I reached out, and with my other hand I took hold of it just by the tail. I had him. Straining under the weight of the snake, I lifted him up and out of the cage. As I turned toward my sister, I could see a look of pure disgust on her face. That look alone was almost worth having to hold the snake. It was heavy, though, and I knew I couldn't hold it out that way for long. I lifted it over my head and slung it over my shoulders. That was the way I'd always held Bogart. That's disgusting, Janice shrieked. Actually, it's a pretty snake, my father said. Nice browns and blacks in an interesting pattern. He reached out and stroked it. It feels very smooth and warm. Do you want to touch it? He asked my sister. Not in a million years, she yelled and rushed off. I heard the door to her bedroom slam shut. I guess that means no, I said. My father looked amused. I guess so. You'd better put it away now. Sure, no problem. The words were hardly out of my mouth when the snake bucked and twisted and I lost my grip on its tail. As I struggled to regain my hold, the snake tried to coil around me. Could you please help me grab a hold of... I stopped mid-sentence as I secured my hold, and then in one motion, flipped the boa off my shoulders so I was holding it in front of me. I placed it in the pen, and before it could react, I let go and closed the lid. Good, my father said. I'm glad it's back in the pen. His voice sounded different. I glanced at him and saw the strangest look in his eyes. You don't like snakes, do you? I asked. It's a lot more than not liking them. They scare me. You? You're scared of snakes? I asked. I was shocked. I'd never even imagined that my father was afraid of anything. Have been since I was little, he answered. But why did you come up here to see it? Or make me take it out of the box? You even touched it. That didn't make any sense to me. I had to, he said, and then paused. It wasn't just Janice I was talking to when I said you have to confront your fears. That's something we all have to work on. Understand? I think so, I mumbled. Good. Now click that latch to lock in the snake. And I want you to pile something heavy like some of the encyclopedias on top of the lid, just in case. That sounded like a fine idea to me, as well. Somehow I felt less safe knowing my father had been scared. I rearranged my pillow for the 300th time and shuffled my feet around inside my sleeping bag. I hadn't been able to get to sleep. No big surprise there. There was always something to worry about. At least tonight, I knew what I was worried about. I turned over and faced the pen. There, close enough for me to reach out and touch it, was the snake, in the dark. I could see the outline of the wooden structure, the books piled on the top, the whole set of encyclopedias. I wasn't taking any chances. A couple of times I thought I could hear the boa moving around inside. Likely it was just the sound of another one of my animals. The night was always filled with the sounds of somebody moving around in a cage, or eating or squawking or drinking or running around in an exercise wheel. I was tempted to get up and peer through the little mesh window on the top of the pen. I knew there wasn't any point, though. The room was dark and the pen was darker. Even if I looked, I wouldn't be able to see anything. I knew the snake was in there. I knew the latch was in place and the books were on top. I knew it couldn't get out, and I also knew that I was going to get even less sleep tonight than usual.